welcome to Butterflies of Wisdom. And I don't know how I got so lucky today. Get to interview all these famous rock stars, at least in my eyes, on my podcast. I don't know how I get so lucky, why they say yes to me, but enough with my little rock star moment there. I have another fabulous podcast host with me today. Her name is Brandie Weikle, and she is out of Toronto, Canada, which is one of my favorite all-time cities in the world. And she hosts the New Family podcast and what the changing culture of family is like today. That's her tagline. And yes, I do listen to a podcast, so yes, I know a tagline. But without further ado, I'm going to let Miss Brandie take it away.
Hi there, Lynn. Glad to be here. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you. No, thank you. And so, Brandie, why did you see a need to fill a niche in a podcast?
Well, I had been working as a journalist with a specialty in parenting for quite some time, somewhere around 15 years, I think. And I had become aware that parenting media still speaks to people as though families kind of look one way. So most families do, at least. There's married mom and dad in a relationship where mom is possibly quite likely the primary caregiver, and where dad is quite likely a breadwinner with the 2 kids and the golden retriever and the white picket fence. And if you don't have exactly that picture, if your family doesn't look like that, it can feel a little excluding. I was a parenting magazine editor, and so I was intimately aware that we would cover issues like same-sex marriage or divorce or adoption, but it would be sort of a once-a-year sort of thing, rather than talking about families in general as taking these many, many forms.
Yes, I highly support your podcast. And yes, if you guys want to stop this podcast and go search for the New Family podcast, by all means do. And your latest episode, which I listened to it yesterday and came out on Monday. White boys are not being as well educated as girls. Just fascinated me, and I agreed with your guest that boys are more into Tonka trucks than girls are. But I agree that we should be looking at families different.
Absolutely. They look like a lot of different things. And what I found when I started the website, thenewfamily.com, I started with this project called the 1,000 Families Project, which set out to tell the first-person stories of families in every shape and form until we'd reached 1,000 stories. And I found that the response was really positive. People were just really enjoying this glimpse into other families' lives, different ways of living, different family structures, different ways of forming a family, deciding who's family to you, and that it would likely be a natural fit to hear those stories and tackle those kinds of issues through audio, because it's such an intimate medium, as you well know. And so it allows me another way of kind of showing what different family structures are like and encouraging those, and also encouraging kind of what I hope to be sort of out-of-the-box thinking a bit about family, and perhaps a willingness to question some of the ways that we do things as a society, including, as you saw in that last episode, the way we educate people.
And now I'm going to ask what your favorite child question. And I know you're going to a bit trick with this one, but what has been your favorite podcast episode you have done?
Oh, gosh. Oh, I find that so hard because I get so attached to them all. Well, how about this? I think one of my favorites was the one we did for the 50th episode, where I actually interviewed my co-parent, my former husband, the father of my children, about our next door neighbor's living situation. So we know our situation is a little unusual, and people want to hear about it and have felt inspired by being able to think of a different way of doing family after separation and divorce, and it being more amicable and peaceful than we may have seen previously. And so I guess I have a special fondness for that one, because I think that it was fun to talk to Derek, who is a dear friend of mine still, and there was really positive feedback on it.
That just seems fascinating to me. That just seems fascinating that you can get along with your husband and be very best friends and live next door to each other. That just, and Brandie's open about this on the podcast. You guys, she's not just being open about it with me. She's completely open. And yeah, that just ceases to amaze me, Brandie, and I'm not just saying that. It still ceases to amaze me.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. It's just what has felt right for us and what our family knows.
Yeah, what the family knows. You know, I'm now acquiring an extended family, and luckily I get along with my extended family, my stepmom and stepsister, and luckily they accept me as a disabled person, which leads me into my next question. I know you wanted to talk about disabilities on my podcast, and so please share your feelings on that.
Oh, sure. Well, I just wanted to say that some of the inspiring families that I've been able to talk about on the website and through the podcast have, members of their families that maybe are differently abled or have disabilities. One of the stories that I love very most from the Thousand Families Project that we did fairly early on was by a man called Mark Brisson, and his family included his wife and their small son, but also their best friend from camp, who just happens to use a wheelchair. And when things in his own personal family had changed a little bit, it just made sense for he to join their household. And he lives has the role of uncle to their child. And it's a very special relationship, and one I found truly inspiring. I've also had the privilege of talking to parents who have children who have some difficult disabilities, but who require a lot of special care, but who really emphasize the amount of joy that they have in their lives because of these children, and who just have such a positive outlook. I also had a chance not too long ago to interview a man called Robert Burren, who he was paralyzed from the waist down following an accident on his mountain bike. And I don't know if I have spoken to a lot of people who have more resilience than he shared with us that day. He told the story of lying on the forest floor waiting for his friend to go get help, and he was already problem solving about how he would do things in the house. I think a lot of people will be in such a blind panic in a massive accident like that when they realize they can no longer feel their legs. And he and his wife decided very mindfully that they would just never let the fact that this had happened to him, get in the way of achieving all of their dreams. So he's gone on to do marathons, an Ironman, all kinds of incredible physical activities, and he's just got a great family and a really positive outlook.
Geez, planning immediately after your accident how you're going to live the rest of your life. God, that seems fascinating to me, because I agree with you. Most people would be in a blind panic attack.
Mm-hmm. You can just imagine the hormones flying through your body, the fear. Yet he was lying there with enough rationality to start to, as I said, problem solve around how was he going to retrofit his house, what was life going to be like now, how might his work have to change? And I found it remarkable. I think he's a really, really strong person. And he does some public speaking now, sharing his message, which is really positive.
As well. My goodness. So you've interviewed the gamut of people. Now, where can people find you, and how can people support you in this fascinating journey? You know, you already have a supporter out of me, but where can my fan base find you?
Oh, thank you so much for asking. They can find everything at thenewfamily.com. That will lead them to the podcast and ways to subscribe based on wherever they prefer to listen to podcasts. There's also, through there, you can get in touch with us if you have a desire to share your own family story through the 1,000 Families Project. We're always looking for new guest bloggers to share a little bit about their own personal journey. So that's probably the best way. And I'm also on Twitter at Brandie Weikle E. Maybe I can send you that link for your show notes page. You can connect to us at social feeds for the new family through the website.
Well, I'm pretty sure your Twitter is hooked up to your website, isn't it?
Yes, at least my new family one is. I have a personal one too that people are welcome to reach me through as well.
Welcome to reach you on. And before I let you go, because I think your niche is so fascinating, I want to let you ask me a couple questions that you have been dying to ask me.
Okay, sure. Well, I guess I'd like to know kind of what gave you the motivation to become an advocate with your work. I mean, how did you come to that? I know you have your own health challenges, of course, but I just wonder what inspires you to be a leader in this area.
Basically, long story short, I wrote a book at age 23. The book hit number one, not only were my friends, my family, my fan base buying this book, which can be found on Amazon. It's I Come a Winner, you guys, if you haven't discovered that one. And so I Come a W-I-N is how you spell it. And so it really led me to become an advocate in my own right, because I had the stop and smell the roses moment of not only becoming paralyzed for 20 minutes, which I fully admit in my book, but I also had to stop and smell the roses moment of losing my mom, who suffered asthma to meningitis / a brain aneurysm. So that when I left the hospital that day in Denver, Colorado, which is in the U.S., I not only knew I wanted to write a book, I asked my mom in a medical aid in Discover, I said, can I write a book on my life? She goes, yes, as long as you do it gracefully. And then I looked at her one last time as she was dying, and I thought, okay, this is my life's mission, is to become an advocate for those who can't speak, to those who are suffering, and those who can't speak.
Wow. What do you think it was about the way they raised you that encouraged you to have a lot of resilience?
Well, I was very blessed, and I have talked about this before, that I was raised as an able-bodied woman with a sign note of cerebral palsy. All of my classmates throughout my life were able-bodied. And I was very lucky to have the teachers who were trained in special ed before they even met me. So by the time I came walking into that classroom, they knew what to do with me. And so that's what made me very resilient. It's because I never saw myself as a disabled person, even though I quickly discovered I had cerebral palsy at the age of 6, aka CP. I knew it as CP, but it wasn't until I was in high school that I looked up what is CP, and I almost shut the laptop and cried because once I figured out what those call letters CP stood for, I'm like, oh boy, here we go. So I really became an advocate in high school, but in college, and now to this day, I am truly doing my life's calling, so to speak, of being an advocate.
Well, that's great. Well, I really appreciate the work that you do, and I'm glad that you are sharing your very positive message. And I know as a fellow podcaster how much work it is to put together a show as often as you do. So congratulations on keeping it going where you have.
You spoke my words clearly. You spoke my words clearly. As often as we do it, there are days we're thinking, why are we behind this podcasting? Like, oh, wait, this is how we do it. So I appreciate your support, Brandie, and I will definitely support you and continue supporting your podcast. And let me know how I can help you in any way. And that goes for any of my fans there, too. And I am going to close this episode out by asking Brandie what would be her one wish for people to understand about her podcast.
I guess it's a place for people to celebrate the changing face of family, and it's really about not so much just about the tactics of parenting, but it's a podcast about the human condition and how we relate to each other is so much a part of it. Our social relationships are key determinant of our health and our happiness, and the way we live together in all its many forms is a really big part of that, I guess.
Being part of that. And keep sharing your message, Brandie. I know I love it, and I love the fascinating interviews you do, and just keep trucking along. I know you have to go pick up kids at school, but I appreciate your time this afternoon, and I hope you guys enjoyed another fabulous episode with Miss Brandie Weikle E and I. And again, you could find her at the New Family Podcast. Her podcast is also sponsored by Kusher.com. Kusher.com is a calendar app for those of you who are looking for a seamless calendar app. Her podcast is nicely sponsored by them, but we're sponsored by Grace by Grit. Grace by Grit is a clothing line out of San Diego, California, and they're giving you 20% off athletic wear, so go check them out. They are in the show notes as well, and I hope you guys enjoyed another fabulous episode. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you, Ann.